Welcome back to our Green Thumb Gardening Secret Series. Today we're going to talk about some tips, tricks, and finer points of double digging. Let's get going. First, let's discuss some tips and tricks. In a previous episode on double digging, we discussed how having a wheelbarrow and a tarp make moving and piling the first trench of soil much easier and clean up a snap. More can be found on this in that video. Similarly, boards used as backboards, even held temporarily just with stakes, aid tremendously to keep soil and compost from flying all over the place outside of the bed.
I have that backboard there and everything.
Likewise,
You notice I'm standing on some boards. They're like a big snowshoe for your body, or like a footing for your house, so I don't just sink right into this
and seriously compact the soil I've previously loosened and will later move.
get it all messed up.
Double digging also has a few finer points, about which there are inevitable differences of opinion. For what it's worth, my own view is that all these perspectives are valid and just depend on an individual's needs, interest, and abilities. One of these first nuances is how much compost to add to each layer. The most commonly taught traditional double dig specifies 2 inches of compost spread over the entire bed and also spread at the bottom of each trench. As espoused by John Jevons and others, part of this is to maximize the potential for plants while not overusing compost as a resource. It's also reasonable, however, that a gardener could, having done the work to get in there, add 3, 4, or even 6 inches of compost to each layer. It's just up to each individual. Another common nuance of double digging is how wide to make your first trench.
And it's to the width.
The traditional teaching from most sources is to make all trenches 1 foot wide, including your first trench. But this way of doing it causes a problem. You can see here that because I started with a foot wide first trench, I simply don't have enough room to put the soil, even though I put up a pretty substantial backboard.
I think if I didn't have it, it's spilled all over. You don't have enough room at all, and this is a pretty high backboard.
And I have to remove soil from the second trench into the wheelbarrow to be put on the pile with the soil from the first trench. And this can end up being a substantial amount of soil. It also can be frustrating when the soil you're trying to pile on the previous trench keeps on falling back into the trench that you're digging just because a pile is so high. Digging your first trench only 1 foot wide also leaves you with a fairly lopsided bed.
That's what it's mounted up.
That makes for lots of soil moving with a rake. All of these issues can be solved by simply making a 1.5 foot or 2 foot wide or even wider initial trench. Alleviating all these problems by giving you an area to put the soil from the second trench without it mounting too high, needing super tall backboards, or needing to be removed to join the pile from the first trench. Another finer point of double digging is soil mixing. How big of a deal is it? Some people are sticklers for not mixing soil as they move one trench to fill another, wanting to avoid killing the aerobic and anaerobic microbes by inverting them. Others turn their soil right over, either not aware of this issue or figuring the microbes will figure it out. To be fair and honest, it is true that in typical soil that inverting your aerobic microbes from the top 6 to 8 inches with the deeper anaerobic microbes causes a significant disruption of your soil's microbial life. But then again, the whole point of double digging is loosening and aerating your soil much deeper, which should provide the air the aerobic microbes need at a deeper level. Either way, try as one might, honestly, it's difficult to keep the soil layers from mixing, as the soil cleaves off into the previous trench in haphazard chunks when you initially insert your spade, and the soil you're piling in a previous trench continually falls back into your current trench while you're trying to dig it to its full depth. You'll probably come to some of your own compromises about soil inversion. As just one person's example of a compromise, I tried hard not to mix the layers, but still take a middle ground, favoring well-loosened soil over unmixed soil, but still trying not to completely invert the soil at any point.
There's 2 ways of looking at this. You can go and kind of try not to move the layers as you move and go and like that thing gets placed on the top like that. So try not to, all the point of that is try not to disrupt the aerobic and anaerobic balance. Or you can say, you know, it's the whole point of this is that it gets mixed and that it becomes aerobic. You're creating an aerobic gardening system deeper in the soil. That's the point of this. I don't think there's ever been enough research or anything done to say which one is 100% accurate. You have to do this very well, and then check out the aerobic life deep in the soil, which would be a very interesting experiment that I would love to do, but as far as I know, no one's done that. No one can say with certainty which one of those is correct. If the proof is in the pudding, it doesn't matter that much. I try to, if I'm really clearly in a lower layer, I try to put it in a lower spot, like here. It seems to be more clay and whatever, so I'll put it over on that side because that's going to be toward the bottom. But underneath it, I have compost and super loosened spots, so I don't know how much all that matters. I just don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't. I just don't know.
One trick that helps with this is, as I move farther down the bed, I try to put the top layers from the trench I'm digging on the top of the mound of soil over the previous trenches, and put the bottom layers right over into the previous trench. It's not perfect, but it probably helps. Plus, it's likely that all of the extra aeration we're adding to the soil, significant aeration we're adding to the soil, really makes most of this a moot point. I can't say for sure, but we're probably giving the aerobic microbes plenty of air down there. For your own sake, I'd say try as much as is realistic, and don't be too hard on yourself. Whether you're really into making sure the layers don't mix or not into it at all. Either way, the main point is loosening your soil and adding organic matter to this level. The nuances are up to you. Likewise, some people are sort of casual about loosening their soil as they move it, especially when mixing compost into the deeper layer, only moderately turning it in. They're probably thinking, that's good enough. I'll get back in here next year anyway. Other double diggers are kind of intense about it, breaking up any clumps in the top layer as they move it, and fluffing the soil and mixing in the compost into that bottom foot deep layer as much as possible. Again, it's just one example for what it's worth. I'm in the latter category. Even to the point where a digging fork dropped from any height completely buries the tines in several inches of the shaft. The entire time I'm thinking, I've already taken the effort to remove the top foot of soil. Why not take the extra effort to make it as good as possible now, and maybe not have to get back in here for a few years? Either way, the more effort you put in over time, the better your soil and the better your plants.
You can already see the depth of that trench has changed though. Like, well, this is a previously double dug bed, and we're still getting that fluff of that soil. You can imagine your non-double dug stuff. Like, it's crazy to think of how much looser it is. We were a foot deep. I don't know if you can see right here we're almost at the level of the soil. That's how fluffed up that is on that outside. Pull some of that this way. Think about this, if anybody does hydroponic kind of stuff, the soil, they just need nutrients, right? Those roots just need nutrients and a medium in which to grow. And that's still not good enough for me, but it's gonna be good enough for today. And that's how loose it is. If I shoved it in there, easily shove it in just with one hand all the way up to here, that's pretty loose soil.
A fifth nuance of double digging is whether or not to add the soil removed from the first trench back or not. Some put the first trench of soil they removed back in on the far end. Others keep it out for use in their compost, thinking the bed, having been loosened so much as to be a high mound, is tall enough as it is. Either way works fine, and depends more on your local conditions and how high you want your bed. On a similar note, many are likely wondering, how often does a bed need to be double dug? Some say every year. For others, that's unnecessary, unrealistic.
Not for the faint of heart.
For my own sake, for what it's worth, it's easy enough to see when it's time to redo the double dig. The tomatoes tell me when they need a boost. The first year, they're 2 feet above their 5-foot cages, and even though it's only 4 plants and one's a cherry variety, I'm wondering if we really can use all the tomatoes we're getting. Each year, however, they grow to a slightly lesser height. 3 to 5 years after digging, they're just barely reaching the tops of the cages at their peak. And although they're still beautiful, I start wondering if I'm limiting their potential. That's when I know it's time to redo the bed. For your sake, whatever fruits or vegetables you grow in your double dug beds will tell you the same thing over time. Finally, is it worth it? Double digging is a lot of work. But when you have pepper plants that are 3.5 to 4 feet tall by the end of the season, and massive bushes that need tomato cages, and tomato plants that are 8 feet tall, and broccoli plants that are giving amazing heads, it's hard not to think it's worth it. I should be honest, however, that over the years I've settled on my own compromises. I know what ideal is, but I also have people who desire time spent with me, other activities I enjoy, work, and a body that can only do so much anymore. The mix of methods I use is my attempt to make the ideal out of all those parts of my life, not just my garden. I've also noticed that only a few plants I regularly grow really benefit greatly from double dug beds: tomatoes, peppers, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. Therefore, I only double dig the areas for those plants that really benefit from it. The rest do well enough in other formats. Being in such loose soil can actually mean requiring extra supports for some plants. Typical for tomatoes anyway, and easy enough for peppers, it's not hard to add extra support, but it's awkward for plants like corn. If I were as full of vigor as I was when I was digging multiple beds for family in years past, plus my own, I'd probably still do it for all my garden plants every year. However, I'd be ignoring the wisdom of it not being needed for some, and possibly even a bit detrimental for a few. Plus, it's quite a commitment. The last single bed of 20 by 5 took me 17 hours of intense work. Again.
Not for the faint of heart.
So I, personally, limit it. You make your own choices, and happy gardening. That's it for this episode. Hopefully some of those tips, tricks, and finer points help you out and or give you some food for thought. And until next time, stay open to growing. And as always, check out our Twitter and Instagram. By the same token, check out our website for much more information on all of these topics.
Not for the faint of heart.